with players like yourself for playing time, Ramin. At the beginning of the season, my fitness was much higher than yours. At the end of the season, we were equal.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Between the Fields. We're your hosts, Ramin. This is Dennis Boskert, both collegiate athletes from FAU's men's soccer team. Dennis,
Yep, today we are joined by an old teammate of ours, once captain of the team, Patrick Darby.
the one and only. Welcome, Pat. Thanks for taking some time out of your day here to talk to us and our viewers about
Yes,
your journey.
please tell everyone, I guess kind of give it away, what college you went to, sport, and what you do currently.
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys for having me. Super excited to be on the show. Very fun time here speaking with you guys, of course. I went to Florida Atlantic University. I graduated back in 2016, and I'm currently working as a category manager at a grocery store called Lidl up in Washington, D.C.
Awesome, awesome, very cool.
What exactly does a category manager do?
Well, Dennis, they manage the category,
Mm.
which
That's
in other terms
what,
means that
and you know what?
I'm responsible for the P&L of a certain set of items within the grocery store.
So
And
like dairy or fish, for example.
So I'm responsible for fish and chilled convenience at this moment. I determine what items are in our store, how we merchandise them, who supplies them, what the packaging looks like, and I also then determine if the items are strong enough to remain in our store based on how they perform from a financial standpoint.
Very cool.
Awesome. And you know what, Pat, we're gonna get more into that, but first we want to go all the way back to the beginning of your journey at with soccer and
Mhm.
and and how he started, right, Dennis?
How he started playing soccer or how he got recruited?
Well, yeah, how he got recruited
Oh,
into
okay. Just
into
making sure.
college and kind of how everything went into you getting recruited to the college that you went to. Tell us a little
Sure.
bit about what you did to get into college to play soccer collegiately.
Sure. So, like, probably 99% of collegiate soccer players, I started playing soccer way back when I was a child, but becoming a college athlete did not become a reality until around 15 or 16 years old. That's when you start finding yourselves on a club team that is competitive, going to multiple large scale tournaments that bring attention to the teams and to the players by having coaches there. The further that process, you then have to do your own research. You decide what type of program you want to be in, what type of environment, what type of university. You then reach out to those schools directly via email, send a clip, either a highlight clip, a film clip, your GPA, your school data, all that information to give yourself the best foot forward to let those coaches know who you are. You can then supplement those major tournaments with ID camps. So when you ask how I was recruited, I went to a local ID camp that had the local South Florida schools because I knew I wanted to stay local. And from there, that's where I met his name. It was Coach Tom at the time, and he was the one who found me there, and I was recruited through that process. So after the ID camp, they then reached out to me. We then had a meeting scheduled. They came to some games. I did the visit, and then I signed the official letter of intent saying I was going to go to Florida Atlantic University.
All right, Pat. So did you have FAU as one of your schools that you were interested in going to? Is that what you said, or?
Yes. So originally I was looking elsewhere, but as we headed towards the more crunch time of when I needed to make a decision, I knew that I wanted to stay local and in Florida. So looking at the programs that were available, you had programs like USF, UCF, FAU, FIU, and again, FAU is the one for me that made the most sense.
Because it was closest to home, or it had a certain major that you were interested in going to school for?
It was what they had to offer both academically, yes, where I was in regards to proximity to my family, and also what they could offer me financially, both through a athletic scholarship and more importantly, an academic scholarship.
Gotcha.
And Pat, thank you for that information. I just also want to ask you, like, for anybody that's kind of going through this whole process, they might think like, well, hey, am I good enough to apply to college? Did you like have any doubts about your abilities as you're going in? Like, hey, can I? Because that's kind of intimidating to play for a college. Do you have any doubts at all or anything like that? Like, hey, am I good enough to play in the collegiate level, or do you feel like was that ever a concern for you? Or I mean, I can personally say that for myself. I don't know. I'm just curious to get your take on it.
Sure. I think when you compete at the highest level that you do in amateur soccer, which is doing your again your major showcase tournaments where clubs and players come around from all over the country to cover these events, you can see how drastic the level is. There's going to be some players that look like absolute studs, and other times you'll see players that kind of fall off on the end of that team. I think from my perspective, I realized I was good enough to play in college when the coaches started reaching out to me. So when a coach comes up to you and says, "Hey, I want you on my team," at that point you realize, okay, if I can make this team, I could probably make another team. And
It was
that's
like a
when you
good
start to
confidence
realize.
boost.
A huge boost, yeah, definitely.
Correct. And I think
Basically
for me that
validating it.
correct. And that's how I knew I was able to do it. So leading up to that, it was I want to do it. I hope I can do it. You get your first soft offer, just like I want to see more of you. And you're like, okay, maybe I really can do this. And that's kind of where it took off for me after that.
All right, cool. So once you signed your letter of intent, uh did they reach out with kind of like a workout packet or anything to like kind of
Mhm.
prepare yourself? Because it is a big transition coming from high school or club soccer coming into especially a Division 1 program. It's a big level like increase as far as intensity goes on the field.
Yes, so we did. We were provided with a workout slash training packet that had certain weightlifting exercises, certain fitness drills, and then they also encourage you to continue playing with your club team and make sure you play as much as you can over the summer. So I personally followed the packet relatively closely. However, I've always been a fit person, so I added additional running to it, knowing that from friends and other teammates that I've known that I've said, hey, the fitness tests are the hardest part. I made sure that I was fit. However, I also went into college very small and underweight compared to the average college athlete. So I did have to make sure that I was in the weight room to gain some of that size so I could physically compete with some of the bigger boys.
Do you think you held your own?
Yes, I do. I think it took a couple years, but I got there.
Would you say that you're at weight now? You don't have
No,
to
I
answer
am
that, Pat.
20. I am 15 pounds over what I used to play, and I'm a little chunky these days, but that's okay.
That's awesome, Pat. And I just want to kind of, just to kind of summarize your college and your academic experience. What was one of the most challenging things that you, on the field, like in the athletic portion of it and the academic portion of it? What was like? Could you like kind of pinpoint what your most challenging obstacles were on the field and off the
Sure.
field in like the classroom?
I think on the field was the athleticism of some players. You found these people, some other players that were, again, I'm not a very big person, but they were well over 6 feet. They could jump higher, run faster, hit harder. So it's very difficult to learn how to use your body correctly and to think faster than they are. So that way you don't have to compete with them physically. And that was something that took some time to adjust to. Academically, the biggest difference is your scheduling. So when you're in high school, you remember that when you get off of school, you eat you eat a snack, do your homework, go to training, whatever it might be, but most of your day starts at the end of the day. When you're in college, you have a lot more free time, and it's not efficient and it's not possible to do all your studying and all your schoolwork from 7 to 9 like you used to in high school. When you have breaks in between class, you have to make sure you take advantage of them. Go to the library in the middle of the day. You can study at any time rather than that end of the day time that you may have been more accustomed to back in high school. And that was something that took me a couple semesters to realize, feeling like I don't have enough time, but the reality was I just had to use my time during the day more efficiently rather than push everything to the evening.
Yeah, and even then, when you're in college, like you got trainings at what was it, like 6 a.m. Your first training, you leave training, go to class. You have X amount of class, maybe like 2 classes before your next training, which would be at like 3 o'clock, middle afternoon. So you have all these things, and on top of that, you need to factor in time one to study, Two, to recover properly because you're doing this every single day. Like you don't want injuries or anything like that. Uh, and other thing like going to the gym, working out on your free time, or even taking some extra time on the field after practice, before practice. All this stuff adds up, and it kind of eats away time that you would normally have to study or do homework than you normally would when you were in high school.
Yeah, definitely time management, I guess, basically yeah, definitely time management is a huge thing in college, which yeah, you learn very well. Um and then Pat, we also want to know, you played on this field. What went into you selecting your major, and what major did you select while you were at FAU?
So I chose international business and finance. I did a double major. Um, I chose international business because of the soccer team. We were around so many exchange students that came from Norway, Australia, the Caribbean islands. We had Sweden. When you see all these different cultures and these different environments, that encouraged me to learn more about them. And through that, I went into international business. I also wanted to do finance because I felt that understanding the numbers and the math behind those business decisions is a huge factor. Um, at the end of the day, every business runs on numbers in some way, shape, or form. And you have to have a decent understanding of that to be comfortable in the business and also in your personal life to make sure you can handle your own finances and your own budget going forward.
Awesome. And I mean, so like throughout your college experience, you kind of coming towards the, your senior year.
Well, before we get there, I want to
Oh,
bring it back to kind of what was your first thoughts first getting onto the playing field, because we kind of skipped over that, and it's like what's going through your head, mindset. You're in the locker room, you see your names on the board, your first collegiate start. Like, what's going through your mind? What mentally? How are you preparing for this?
Sure, I think so. I didn't know when I was going to have my first start. I was fortunate enough to start the first game of my freshman year and our home opener against UCF. And I remember walking into the locker room, as you mentioned, our coach at the time would write the lineup on the board, and my name was in that right midfield spot, right center midfield spot in our 4-3-3. I was very surprised, but at the end of the day, I think you tell yourself, I've been working so hard for so many years to get here that if your name's on the board, it's on the board for a reason, and you just get prepared to do the best you can out there.
did you immediately think that? If my name's on the board, oh my
That's a
God, yeah.
very HR response right
He
there.
thinks I'm good enough, like you're like, or you're like, hey man, I
No,
just gotta fake it till I make
He's
it.
like, man,
well,
Or
it's UCF. Like
if you
they're
remember what
ranked.
our coach at the time emphasized fitness. That was one of his main pushing points. And when I was competing with players like yourself for playing time, Ramin, at the beginning of the season, my fitness was much higher than yours. At the end of the season, we were equal, but in the beginning, so when you say, "Hey, my name's on the board," I didn't have imposter syndrome. I felt that I should be there and I could be there. Now, when that game ended. Maybe I didn't feel the same, but before the game, it was definitely something that I said, hey, I'm here for a reason. I put the work in these 2 to 3 weeks in preseason. I put the work in over the summer. There's no reason I can't be on the board. But again, when we played that game, the pace was fast, the ball was moving quick, the players were moving quick, and I definitely didn't feel as confident after that game as I did before it.
No, and I'm not discrediting anything from you, Pat. The only reason I say that is because, hey, here it is, freshman. You're starting your first game. You got the whole, you got all the upperclassmen that may or may not be starting, and you're starting over them. You got to feel like, it's just that locker room energy where you're like, man, they got a freshman starting over me. This guy, who's he think he is? It's just, I don't know. And I feel like it would be a natural feeling to be like, man, am I, I don't know if that's relatable or all at all, but yeah, yeah. No, not
I
to
think it's
discredit you
tough
by
because
any means.
no,
Okay.
no, and you're not at all, but you're also sharing how you felt because I was an underclassman and you were an upperclassman. So I didn't feel that I was a freshman starting over an upperclassman the way you felt. I just felt that I came into the team and I'm just on the board.
Gotcha.
Right.
And that's one way to look at it. When you're joining a sports team, like sure, there's different classes like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, but when you're on a sports team, sure, seniority helps a little bit because you have more experience on the field, but when it comes down to it, I mean, your skill can be at a higher level than a senior. So really, those levels really don't matter as long as you're performing and you're doing what you got to do.
Correct.
And it's kind of like that in the workforce, though. You got that hierarchical like status. You might be more qualified than somebody else,
Yeah.
but you deal with that kind of like that energy
Yep.
too. That yeah.
So take it away. You can go ahead and ask
Oh
your
well,
question.
okay. So the question I was also going to ask Pat was you are getting ready to graduate. You have your major selected. Did you know what you exactly wanted to do and go into after soccer? Did you have like an idea of what you wanted to start as a career?
No.
Did you
No,
do
I
any
did not. So
internships?
I'm sorry.
Did you do any like internships during college to kind
I
of get a
I
feel?
did. Yeah, so I did. So the only thing I knew is maybe not the most glamorous thing to say, but I knew I was going to work at a desk job. I knew that I was going to graduate college and get a job in corporate America. That was always the plan. So I was very fortunate to have the upbringing I had, and my father had a 40-hour a week desk job his whole life, and he provided the life that I had and the life I hope to give to my future family. So that was kind of what I modeled what I wanted to do going forward. That being said, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what industry I wanted to go in, what side of the business I wanted to go in. I just knew it would be in corporate America. I did an internship at a company called FIS working in IT. I did not enjoy that. So I knew after college I would not be doing that. Um, and then when I graduated, I had a couple months off and I was job searching and I took the first job I could find, which was in a call center. I realized that was not for me. And then I moved on to find something that made a little more sense for me, which was in the world of produce and grocery.
Selling blueberries.
Yes. So my second job was an account manager for a produce company where we prioritized blueberries, blackberries, and strawberries. So I did that for a few years, built up a solid book of business, and then decided I
He was a
wanted to
farmer.
get onto the buying side of the business. So I then joined the local retailer, Lidl, that I mentioned, where I'm currently working.
That's awesome. And no, also, yeah, we just want to see how your kind of journey and your step to how you got to where you are now. Um, and I guess some questions that we kind of want to ask you, like just from your one field that you were on, the soccer field, and then how you transitioned into your actual professional field. We just have
Mhm.
more kind of questions like from what you took away from there and how you apply it into your work.
These are some good thought-provoking
And
questions.
I don't want to mess this question up, so I'm just gonna
Oh, I thought you wrote it down.
I did, but
Oh, sloppy handwriting.
we somebody put their gum on my question, so I'm just gonna go ahead and
Where's our social media manager? Get
uh
her in here.
yeah, she's consulting.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, so question just has to do with diversity and inclusion, like
Mhm.
championship team, all right? It says great
Okay.
teams have diverse skill sets. How do you foster an inclusive and high performing culture in the workplace?
Well,
So
I think part of the answer is in the question. When you talk about inclusive, you have to make sure you include everyone. So I think it's very important that when you're in your team meetings, when you're in your team environment, just like when you were on the field, you pass the ball to the 11 or the 10 other players that are with you, and you don't shy away from giving a teammate the ball. If they're in the right position, you're going to give them the ball because that's what's best for the team. The same way with your corporate team, if you know that someone on your team can make something happen that you can't or can do something better than you, these are a time when you have to be honest with yourself and say, hey, it's best if this person does that because they're going to do the best job of it. And by dishing off that responsibility to everyone and letting them know that what they can do, the input they can add is very valuable, that should help bring the team together, knowing that everyone feels they're adding some type of value to the organization.
So would you say that delegating responsibilities to a certain coworker or teammates to their strengths rather than, you trying to do it yourself or you just give it to some like random person, random coworker, you kind of delegate certain responsibilities to people whose it would like they would excel at rather than giving out randomly?
Correct. Delegate. You delegate where you think they would excel, whether they have a track record and they've proven they can do it, or what you believe is best for them. So you give them a chance to continue to grow. So to help build that team, if you help challenge them and push them and say, hey, I know you haven't done this before, but I think you can crush it, it is very good when they then do a good job and know that they're getting better. And then in that same situation, as you look to push off those responsibilities and help people move forward, you have to be willing to take a step back, evaluate those decisions, and of course, listen to the feedback of the group. You have to make sure that you're not just speaking over them, saying this is what you have to do, but actively encouraging them to say, hey, did you enjoy doing this? Did it help you? Did it benefit you? What can we do differently so that it is better going forward?
That's awesome. Yeah, and
Very
I think
strong.
that soccer, honestly, yeah, I think it definitely would help with that. And no, I like how you put it. So that's awesome.
My turn.
Yeah, go ahead with your question, Dennis.
Hey, Pat. Here's a critical thinking question for you.
Sir.
Integrity is a major part of sports. How do you ensure ethical decision making in a leadership role?
I think that can be very tricky because you have to make sure that your moral compass aligns with the ethics, right? So being ethical means you're doing the right things, but you also have to remember when you're working in corporate America, you need to do what's best for the business. So you have to ensure that what you're doing is done properly, but also with the right stakeholders in mind. So every decision you take, every action you take, obviously is going to impact those around you, but it is also important that it is what's best for the business. That's why you're in that position. That's why you're in that role. So it can be a little tricky. The same way in soccer, where yes, I want you to be successful as my teammate, but like Ramin said, it's frustrating as a junior or a senior to come in and see a freshman's name on the board. So sure, he's happy for me, but he also wants his name to be on the board. So how do you balance doing those right things and encouraging growth and being happy for your teammates and your friends and your coworkers while also having the hard conversations and doing the right things for the business? It can be very tricky to balance them. And I think the best way to do so is to just make sure you're thinking clearly and not emotionally. You have to remember when you're at work, when you're in that corporate environment, it's just a job, it's just business. And you have to be able to separate some of your more sentimental feelings from that aspect of it.
Yeah, and I feel both these questions kind of tie in together in a sense because I mean, just how in the previous question you're delegating certain things to people who may excel at that certain task a little better than the others. Kind of same way on the soccer field with this question, like, you sure the seniors or juniors might not want to see a freshman on the board, but it's the manager, or in this sense, the coach, you know, doing what's best for the entire group or the team as a whole, putting that
Mhm.
player in.
It could be as simple as that example we talked about the other day. Remember, we had to run 6 a.m.s. We had to get up early. We had to run around the field, and the lights were off at one of the end of the field. So,
Oh, yeah.
so everybody cut the corners on the running the laps instead of running the whole
Doing the
thing
full
because
thing
they wanted
for
to try
the
and get ahead to make it look like they were running faster. And
Mhm.
it's just that integral integrity part of it, and not cutting corners on the soccer field
Yeah.
is like, also not cutting corners in real life and your professional life. But
Mhm.
yeah.
So you go ahead and take the last.
So then Pat, we just always like to ask knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self about the journey from a soccer player into the professional life, or just any advice you would give yourself as you're transitioning from soccer into the work field?
Yeah, I think I would have two main pieces of advice. The first one being make a decision, take a decision, and don't look back. Whether you're worried it's the right decision, the wrong decision, it's a smart decision, it doesn't matter.
No
If in your
regrets.
gut you're saying, I want to do something, do it, see what happens, and see if it works out. You're going to have more regret if you don't take the decision and you sit there saying, oh, I wish I would have. So if an opportunity arises, even if it's outside of your comfort zone, even if it's something that's very new to you, even if it scares you a little bit, take the decision and don't look back.
Awesome.
My second, in that same breath, is the best time to get a job is when you have a job.
Okay,
So
same breath.
if you want to take a decision and move forward in your career, it's probably best to do that when you're currently working rather than quitting that job out of haste and then trying to find a job later.
Good advice. Appreciate that, Pat. Dennis, anything else?
I think that's it. Pat, thank you for coming on. We're gonna be attacking your now wife next.
That's right. We'll have to get her on the podcast. But Pat,
Yes,
thank you.
Ramin, I appreciate you saying get her on the podcast and not attacking her, but yes, she'll be very excited to join in the near future.
Uh, Pat, thank you so much to our viewers watching. You guys can see this video on Tuesday at 7 p.m. On Spotify and YouTube. We will drop the link that day. And
Thanks for watching.
thank you for watching, guys. Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, thanks for having me.